Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Doc Williams, and today we are with a special guest. Who are we with today? Who do we
I'm
have?
Dustin PolyInnovator. I mean, this is technically on my channel anyway, so people should know what I'm doing or
Maybe
who
they're
I
finding
am.
this for the first time. Don't
That's true.
don't
That's
think
true.
that. Come
Welcome to
on
the
now.
people who are new.
Exactly. So, Dustin, thank you so much for being here. This episode,
Thanks for
it's
having
all
me.
about you. It's all about you. I need to know more about you. We're gonna dive deep into your passions, your
Cool.
channel, what you're trying to do. So, I think the first logical step is, do you know the name of your kindergarten teacher?
I know my third grade teacher, and I
Okay.
recognize my first grade teacher, but I don't remember what my kindergarten teacher was. I have no memory of that person at all. Like, I know it was a woman. That's all I know.
Tell me about third grade. Why did that pop in your head?
Well, I did go to a different school. Like, out of the 5 years of elementary or 6 years of elementary, I went to one school for third grade that was different, and that's just we just moved for a split second. It was Mr. Weeks. I think he was the only male teacher I had actually throughout elementary school, and it was just interesting this experience of having a new environment, different friends, and stuff like that. Eventually, too, those friends, from both schools that you'll see in high school, stuff like that.
I love it. I love it. So doesn't we're starting. We're gonna go all over this place,
You're
and
going deep.
I think it's important because you're a polymath. You're a poly. Tell me, we're gonna be talking about this for a little bit, but I first need to know your childhood. What were you into? Was it swimming only? What kind of things were you into when you were a kid?
Swimming happened when I was always loving the pool, but swimming happened when I was a teenager. I was into Pokemon and business. That's what I was into.
Pokemon and business, did they go together as a
Not
child or
not
separate?
really. They might go together as an adult, but as a kid, no. I think that when I was 8 or 9, I asked for like office supplies for my birthday because I wanted to be a businessman. And as I got older, I'd say CEO. And I loved Pokemon. I was obsessed with Pokemon growing up, so I'd buy any memorabilia or merchandise I could get my hands on. Eventually, I realized that this was like not sustainable and just kind of a waste of money and time. So I'd focus on the Pokemon cards and games. I played most of the games up until the 3DS era, essentially. And then business wise, I always, would try to find the next hustle, if you will, but I wasn't super successful with it just because I didn't push it hard enough. I think I should have done more, but yeah, you live and learn.
What first of all, I had a Charizard first edition that I sold. I regret every day of my life.
I sold my whole collection, Doc, in like 2018, right before it blew up
Oh no.
for rent money.
Oh no.
So don't drag me into that downward spiral.
I'm
I had to go
sorry.
get a bottle of wine.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So, first of all, I think it's really important to understand we met a couple years ago. I think
Four.
as of 4 years. Wow, crap. Okay, so it's been almost a half a decade. Um, Tell me about Poly Innovator. You were talking about it back then. What what keeps you driving towards that? What is this passion or pursuit that you're going towards with this poly innovation, polymath? Tell me about this. What is this?
So I started in 2017. And really, it's not so much that I'm motivated about PolyInnovator, it's what I'm motivated that PolyInnovator can lead to next. I considered my personal brand to be the foundation for all the careers I wanted to have in life. So I created PolyInnovator to be the marketing aspect and how I present myself to the world so that I could do those future careers. That was the mindset.
Okay. And those future careers, were you trying to just level up your skills to work for a certain company? Was it for you to create your own What, tell me about it.
I started out with content back in like 2012 at the end of high school or so, my last couple years of high school, because I wanted to make a blog, or actually, more importantly, I wanted to make an organization that was meant to unify like polymathic people. Didn't really articulate that back then, but that's what I wanted. I wanted to create a hub of innovators, kind of like an incubator, if you will, but kind of global level. And that was the motivation. And I realized even back then that the way to grow a company or business, like notoriety wise, was to be making content. And so I started blogging and then eventually started making podcasts. And in 2017, I was doing both personal brand and the old endeavor. And I realized I'm not good. Not yet. And that's okay. But I got to figure out how to do it. And I got to focus on that. And so I started making my own education system. I decided, thanks to Gary Vee, that I should document that journey doing it so that way I could prove that I learned this stuff. And eventually I realized, the framework I created is more important than me documenting. Should have done both, but I pivoted to just talking about the system itself, knowledge management, essentially. It wasn't really called that back then, but that's what it was. And that's what I started doing with content, and eventually pivoted to doing interviews and started talking about my swimming background, started talking about gaming, started talking about poly tools and basically tools in general. And that's how it expanded.
And how have you liked this process? You interviewing people, doing all of this work. Is it fulfilling? Do you feel like what's your tell me more about that. What's your inclination when you're creating all this stuff?
Both of my shows are made actually for different reasons, ironically, which is kind of interesting. I don't think I've told the people about that before. The Polymath Polycast, I started out as a solo stuff. And I always wanted to do interviews, just had no idea how to get started. Eventually, Matchmaker.fm came out, and it made it easier for me to get going. I realized now you can just DM people, and it's actually more common to do so now. But when I started in 2020, I just didn't know how to get going with it. Once I did, I didn't stop. But I did it because I wanted to highlight these multidisciplinary individuals in all the different disciplines that they embody. And that was like the motivation behind it. I wanted to be able to take someone like you who has a lot of different things in the background. I had you on the show, for example, and wanted to just highlight your multidisciplinary lifestyle and talk about how do you live it. Because there's no shows really out there. There's a few now, kind of, but not the same as the Polycast, where you get to embody all aspects of yourself. You only focus on one thing on most of these shows. And then the other show, the Poly Tools Creator Spotlight, I made because I wanted to talk to content creators. So at least half of all the Polycast guests were also creators themselves, like yourself here too. And I would talk to you about your content journey and stuff like that. That would only be about a fourth or a third of the conversation because we moved on to your other disciplines or endeavors. And I realized I really want to dig into that. Like I like talking shop. It's like canon for me. I want to talk tools. I want to talk history. Let's talk content. And so I made the creator show so I could do that. And also to showcase like these modern content creators or some really unique strategies and stuff like that. And it's also kind of an excuse to the network, grow my network, if you will.
Throughout all of that, let me ask you this. Do you feel like you're pivoting a lot as you're creating this stuff, or you're going with the flow, or tell me about it?
I don't think I pivot hardly at all, but I definitely think I go with the flow. I don't try to let myself follow the shiny object syndrome too much. If there's something new, I try to resist that. I go down rabbit holes and I'll make content around those rabbit holes, but I usually I gave myself permission to make content around other niches on my Omni blog. That's why I called it an Omni blog, the all blog, if you will, so I can talk about anything on it. It's not niche focused. But then the Poly Pro membership on my website is basically a collection of these mega posts. Generally, I make those posts when I'm super obsessed with something. Like when the metaverse was a big thing and AI and all this blowing up, I made a huge post about it because I was digging into it myself. Might as well distill it in words. I love the Kung Fu Panda series, and so I made a really in-depth post about Kung Fu Panda, and I combined all the videos I found of it and all these cool blog posts and stuff like that, and added my own take on a lot of those topics too. And so I made this mega post. And so when I find something different that I want to talk about, I usually just let it go through there and not pivot. However, there's been a couple points, the gaming and poly tools in particular, where I realized pivots were necessary. And so I listened to myself and I was like, okay, let's do it. Let's make this pivot.
Tell me about what is it? Do you love the Kung Fu Panda movies? I'm going to be honest with you. I've never seen them.
Oh, I hate you. You need to. I think they're some of the most philosophically filled movies in existence. It's crazy just how much philosophy they put into it and how many references to particularly Eastern religion that they have, like Buddhism, Taoism, stuff like that. And so there's symbolism and quotes and all kinds of stuff in these movies. And the actual plot and story threads of it really embody a lot of the same learnings you get from these Eastern philosophies. And so even the second movie in particular, the main character finds out about his history, his past, and how his childhood trauma, doesn't have to impact him who he is today. And he learns to find inner peace despite the fact he had a really troubled upbringing. And in the third movie, he gets to find his long-lost father. And yeah, I won't spoil in the movies because I definitely still want you to watch them, but it's one of those things where they're very helpful for a lot of people to process their own life, let alone just embody those movies for a little bit.
I love it. Did they make 4 or only 3?
They made 4. I haven't watched the newest one, ironically, but that was because I was trying to save it to watch with somebody. So
I like it. I like it. Okay. All right. Good times. All right.
there's shot number 1.
So let me ask you
Right.
this. You were talking about multidisciplinary.
Mm.
Was there a time in your childhood or someone you looked up to that you thought this is why you wanted to go this path, or that's why you were interested?
Not necessarily. I mean, both my mom and my grandma, who were very influential in my childhood, they were all doing many different things over the course of their life. Not as much in the sense of like polymathic, but definitely in a jack of all trades kind of level. And especially nowadays, they've definitely split off to many different things over the course of their life. But early on, like middle school, at the very earliest, I think, maybe a little bit earlier, I was obsessed with Leonardo da Vinci, and really just the Renaissance and that time period. Even Michelangelo was really interesting too. And so I found myself just driven by that. And that's kind of how I found the polymath term. And as I got older, I started working and I fell into doing many different roles. And I liked doing many different roles, even if my employer wanted me to focus on just one.
Yeah, yeah. Very interesting. What was that last sentence you just said?
Well, my employer wanted me to focus on like lifeguarding. And I wanted to do teaching for some lessons in water aerobics and fitness attending, and then lifeguarding and pool managing.
So were you an operator? Did you do less? What happened with that? Did you stay at the same pool? What happened?
So eventually, he was not really the greatest boss, and he gave me a lot of crap about trying to do the both of them. Even though I had plenty of hours, they just didn't want to give me hours because of the whole benefits thing. But it was funny because I like had plenty of time. I gave myself equally to each one, so I did it right. Maybe I should have communicated more. But eventually, when it came to a choice, essentially not by my decision, but it was kind of forced, I decided, okay, well, I'm lifeguarding because I want to, and you need me to, but I'd rather teach. And if you're going to give me hell about teaching, then I'm just going to teach. And so I stopped lifeguarding and pool managing and just stayed on as a swim instructor and water aerobics instructor. And I taught more than just those 2 classes, but that was the main things. But then eventually became personal trainer. And then my last role there was supervisor of the whole building, not like full time, but just like a temporary guy. And it was one of those things where, I ended my capstone.
Yep. Yep. Very interesting. So that kind of leads me into this. You said capstone. What was your methodology, or what was this progression of education that you set up or you were working on?
The DIY process, I tried to call it a DIY degree, but the problem was someone already had that trademark back in the day. Ironically, this guy was trying to over monetize and like just try to sell coaching. So it's like $2,000 or something like that. So he was kind of counterintuitive to the whole DIY process. But I decided, modularity is kind of more important to me anyways, especially for people who are polymathic. Your interests are going to change. If you're neurodivergent, your interests are going to be like hyperfixations are going to change. So you want a system that can adapt to polymathic and or neurodivergent people who are going to be shifting their focus every so often. And one thing I learned in lifeguarding is that you can't focus on one thing for a super long time. Your brain can only handle so much. And so it's good to switch spots. So even though I was still watching the zone of the pool, I was watching a different zone. And so you'd switch from one spot to the next spot, then the next spot, and that helped keep your focus going for longer. And so by pivoting just ever so slightly in that regard, you could do more in the long run in the same amount of time. So that was kind of the process behind the framework.
Love it. Um,
Or the mindset, I guess.
what kind of kids did you teach? Was it all ages? Did you focus on infants? What happened?
I generally like the older kids a bit more. I started out the younger, like most of the swim lessons do, and I taught from 6 months to 73 years old.
Well, all in the same class. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was interesting because, like, technically speaking, if you were to include my waterbook stuff, my oldest client was like 96.
I love it. I love it. What do you think most content creators are doing wrong right now?
Not being omnichannel enough.
Tell me more.
Oh, it's like that's instantaneously what I think. People do not diversify, and they put all their stuff in one basket. Like that was one of the first posts I made on the PolyTools newsletters. Like, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't do this. I have a person I know who got into content creation through TikTok, and they're only on TikTok. And this person should definitely be writing on Substack or doing live streams on YouTube or whatever. I was trying to get this person to do more, and still you have to convince them to do it. but I'm slowly weaning them into it, and just being able to have the same posts syndicated across platforms just to make sure that you have that stability net. But if YouTube were to go tomorrow or TikTok to go tomorrow, then you're screwed because you only have all your stuff on there. And the other thing is too, like, I think a lot of modern content creators should be omni-channel and making written audio and video in some shape or form. Even if you're using Notebook LM for podcasts, or if you're doing repurposing for taking your audio and video, turn it into a blog post, whatever you're doing, like, just try to make a newsletter. If that's the only written piece you're making is a newsletter, cool. At least you have a written piece. That's the point.
Could you tell me a little bit, why do you think most people don't? Are they fearful? Is it just a bandwidth thing?
Usually bandwidth. I think fear only stops you from the first step, like just starting content in general, like making a video for the first time or making a blog post for the first time, your first pieces of content. And we talk about this a lot on a lot of our calls, but making the first 100 pieces. I got that idea from Roberto Blake. Shout out to him. And the idea is that, like, every skill you have, short form video like on TikTok, or long form on YouTube, or live streaming on Twitch, or making podcasts, or making blog posts, each one of these skills, you have to start over. Even if you've made 1,000 videos, you still need to start over when you start making blog posts. And I think that's where a lot of people don't realize. And once you get past that 100, the bandwidth becomes a lot easier. It's a lot easier to kind of keep that skill going than to build it in the first place. And so that's why I think a lot of people get confused and they don't do it.
Is it a workflow? Is it a tool, like a tech stack, to be omnipresent with all of these platforms? What do you say?
Strategy and automation, really. I mean, as you get more and more skilled, your strategy gets more refined. As you've done it more and more, you find more tools, your automation gets better. And so regardless of which one you start off with, automation or strategy, as long as you have something helping you, that's generally what matters. And then eventually you get both. And then the real determining factor is how hard do you work? So you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you're not putting out content, it doesn't matter. And if you're not putting out content, your automations had nothing to do. So you have to execute. So I think you know what I'm leaning towards here.
No, I don't know, really.
Well,
I don't know. Well, let me ask you this, right? Do you think it's very hard to, like, someone might say, Dustin, like, that's easy for you to say. Like, you have access to these tools. I'm broke. I can't do that.
I'm broke too. What do you mean? I've been broke.
So you're not letting that be an excuse for them, huh?
No, especially since there's usually like free plans. I've done the whole free plan grift in the past. When OpenClip first came out, you got 5 videos a day, right? And what I did was I just made them.
Oh, that's so good. Oh man, that's an old one. I like that. I like it.
You can't do that anymore. That was like literally at the beginning when they had like less worries about the accounts and stuff like that. Now they, will stop you. And I don't want to endorse that either because I love Opus. Pay for your stuff if it's a good tool. But back then, I was like, especially I couldn't afford it because I was having no income. But yeah,
I love it. So, to your left hand side, what kind of books do you have readily available to you? What are we seeing?
One of the best ones here is the How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci.
Ooh, very nice, very nice.
One of the best books I think anyone should ever read is The Tao of Physics, combining science and philosophy and all that jazz. Definitely a very unique and interesting book. Let's get out of away from some of the bigger ones. Let's go to, let's go less dense and go with Stephen Hawking, A Brief History of Time.
All light reading that you put in.
All light reading, yes. That's the reason why I've gone through some. Oh, okay, whatever. Other than that, this is some Zelda manga. There we go, some light reading.
Okay. So my question is, obviously you like taking in more content, reflecting on great pieces of work. How has that inspired you with what you're creating?
I don't generally make a lot of posts based on books or even audiobooks because they're big pieces and that takes a long time to distill down. Even if you're making a summary or making a mega post, like I mentioned earlier for Poly Pro, there's only one book right now that I really want to make a post on, and that's David Epstein's Range. And the only reason why I haven't done it yet is because I haven't fully gone through it all. Sorry, David. And I want to. I just haven't been reading the last 2 years as effectively, and I'm getting better about that. But the thing is, I was so focused on content that I just didn't do as much education, and I needed to balance that back out. But his book is one of the few ones where I'm like, I want to find all the interviews he has. I want to find all the blog posts related to it and combine it all into one resource. And that's the whole point of the PolyPro stuff. But when it comes to like smaller pieces, I have YouTube videos that are talking about being a jack of all trades or being a generalist. And I feel like there needs to be more eyeballs on these. And so while these people are making content that technically competes with mine, what I think is better is that it's not about competition. It's about building up the niche. And so I make a blog post responding to their video and finding the talking points of their video and adding my own 2 cents to it. I think that transformation aspect is really interesting. And that's what I plan on doing more of.
And I like that answer. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper.
Feel free.
You were talking about Da Vinci. You were talking about ones that you really enjoy. Has there been even other influences, not just your content creation, but maybe your way of life or how you approach life? Any of those things?
Definitely the Tao of physics. My key principle of life is balance. The key to life is balance. And in order to live a balanced life, you need to take in the scientific and the philosophical and put them together in a unique way. And that unique way is who you are. And that's why I thought something like this is really interesting. And that's also kind of the polymathic mindset as well, embodying from multiple different angles.
I like it. In front of you, could you pick up one item on your desk that you would like to talk about? Oh, is that Singapore? Is that what I'm saying?
Yeah. Sorry, it's backwards probably.
All right. No. What do we got here?
It is just a Singapore guide. It's a little bit outdated. Where's the map? Yeah, it's got the map to it and all that jazz. And so I picked this up at a used shop one day. And the thing is, even though it's outdated, it's still useful because it's like 2012 or something like that. But I think that when you have a goal in mind, you should be reminded of it. So I even bought like a Singapore little poster to put on the wall to remind myself like where I want to go to. And while I am working on going to Austin first, because I want to get that kind of baby step before I go really far away from family and friends, I think that's where I'm going to be most happy. It's a melting pot of culture. It's one of the most, I guess you could say, neutral countries in the world besides Switzerland. And it's a hub of innovation. It's a hub of technology. It's a hub of modern cities development. And that's why I want to go there. Because one of my areas of life that I want to work in is smart cities. Since I figured I might as well go live in a smart city.
I love it. Tell me about the smart city. Why do you care about it? Tell me about it.
I don't like...
What are smart cities, first of all?
Smart cities are just the futuristic cities where you have, let's say, like smart traffic lights that know when there's traffic on one side but not the other, so they can adjust accordingly. For example, Singapore has a wind problem where they needed to adjust the way their buildings were constructed in order to manage how much wind and temperature, ambient temperature of their city was. That is something that like you have to use big data to understand how is the wind funneling through all the buildings physically. And then the other thing is like Internet of Thing devices. So everything's going to be connected, whether it's a light bulb or a street light or the freaking sensors for the ground for the cars, like traffic sensors and stuff like that. So these are basic examples of what a smart city can do. I guess if you play a game like Watch Dogs, where they have data on just people and traffic, it sounds like Big Brother, but really in reality, it's like trying to make your life easier by using data. And I think that's really the key thing.
And when you go abroad, do you plan on moving there, staying there a short period of time? What's your ideal circumstance?
Probably moving there.
I love it. I love it. Where's the farthest you've ever gone to?
Technically California, probably, or Florida. I mean, I'm in Missouri, so it's one of those things where I'm kind of dead center in the U.S. for the most part, and I'm dead center in Missouri too, no less. And so I think San Diego is probably the farthest I went out.
Mm-hmm. What was your favorite state?
I think that it kind of a tie up between Florida and Texas because I like summertime, I like sun, I like heat, and I really enjoyed being in Orlando. It was one of those things where I went there a couple times, and I think the humid heat was fine to me. It was very breezy because of the water, but I also liked Houston, which is the only city I went to in Texas, but it's pretty similar to Austin in a lot of ways. So, yeah.
Very nice. Now, coming back to what we're almost in 2025, right? We're almost in 2025.
Don't remind me, man. Time flew.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I just don't know what happened to this year. This was a bridge year. What are you excited about in 2025? It can be life, it can be content, it can be really anything that you want to touch upon.
Well, I was aiming to be in Austin by now a couple months ago. That was the ideal. And so ideally in the next couple months, I'll be moving there based on how much I can save up and how long it takes to save up. I realized that I still need to take a trip down there to figure out which neighborhood to live in and stuff like that and look at apartments. And so presumably right now I was thinking I was saving up to move, but really I'm saving up to take the trip first. And that kind of realization helps a little bit. So I'm looking forward to taking that trip. I'm also looking forward to, I told you before, I'm trying to do this content blitz. It's because I want to get through the backlog of stuff I'm doing. I have a lot of projects I need to get done anyways. Like before the call, we were talking about Spotify, uploading all the videos and clips to Spotify for the 2 podcasts. And I'm like halfway done with the bigger podcast and I'm already done with the smaller podcast. So like making progress on that. And I think that'll help with discoverability, first mover advantage on that platform. So I'm hoping that by doing these big endeavors, like posting a whole bunch on YouTube community page and getting ready for, I didn't tell you this, but I got access again, mind you, to the 60 minutes on TikTok feature.
I
And
didn't know
so
anything
like,
about this.
yeah, I know I had got access to the 30-minute and then 60-minute, and then like within a week, they took it away. And it wasn't because of me, they just did it to everybody. And it was just really weird. And then once again, this week, I got access to it. And so I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but I'm going to try to take advantage of that and see if I can keep it this time. And yeah, that'd be cool.
And tell me about this. So
I'm hoping that my bets pay off. That's what I was trying to say.
no, that's good. No, what is this? So 60-minute is 60-minute video, 60-minute live. What is this? 60-minute videos.
Yeah, they had it for like a hot minute earlier this year, I think it was, and then they did the 30-minute one like a little bit before that. And yeah,
Why do you think they're doing that?
they definitely want to compete with YouTube. And ironically, I wish IGTV was still a thing. That was actually
Oh
really
my
cool.
God, I
love
forgot
that.
about IGTV. Oh my
I
goodness.
love that so much.
Man, that's bringing it back, man. I haven't thought about that in a very long
It's
time.
not like 2 years old.
I know, but during the pandemic, it feels like I've aged like 10 years.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
I really cannot tell, like,
you're an old man.
I know, like, it's,
My knees were hurting today. I was like, oh.
see, I'm telling you, it's like, it's kind of weird that I feel like, I think you were in the same boat. We already in the pandemic, we're already thriving doing other content styles. So like, I felt like the first 6 months to a year, so many people were trying to catch up with just getting online and to have a life there that it feels, I can't tell years apart with like,
Yeah,
when did it really
sure.
happen?
I definitely think it was really interesting too, because like you said, you and I had already been making content. And so we basically just got a chance to thrive. It was an opportunity. The COVID opportunity is what a lot of people call it, or the quarantine opportunity. And the thing is, I think it was really interesting because some people took advantage of it more than we did. And that's saying something. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And I say that like there was obviously a lot of bad things happening, but if you were to look past that, I was on the computer a lot over the course of my life, let alone prior to 2020. But then when 2020 hit, I went from being on the computer like 7 hours a day to like 14 or 10 at the very least. And that's kind of how it's continued since then. And while that's not healthy as much, I got a standing desk. I try to go for walks. I try to exercise. I try to compensate for that. And I don't think a lot of people are doing that. So please do that if you're listening in. But it's interesting to think about like, that is a significant increase in production, but also being on the screens and stuff like that. It's kind of curious.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay.
Good times. Good times.
It is good times. So two things I want to go into in a little bit. And what I mean by that is when you're looking at the landscape, I've heard you talk about it before, I believe, but you feel, let me not put words in your mouth. How do you feel about, let me break it down. Modern content creators, define that term.
I think that modern content creators are focusing on trying to figure out what is the meta right now. So like one thing we talked about in the past is I think the meta is multi-streaming, particularly vertically and horizontally. I've said that a lot and it's growing more and more. I think the other meta is like, I noticed this at podcast movement too, where video is taking over the podcast world. Not everyone's happy about it, but it's a thing. And people who are fighting it are not going to be able to grow as fast as the ones who are accepting it. And I think that there's going to be plenty of podcasts that are audio only. Sure, that's fine. There's still a point to have that. But if you're doing interview stuff like this, then you definitely should be doing both video and audio. And so things like that, where if you're able to adapt, like we talked about with 2020 too, being able to adapt to the fact like, hey, now we have a whole bunch more time. Everyone's online. All these new tools are coming out. How do you adapt to that new change? And so I think really a bit like this digital renaissance, going back to the polymathy aspect and, the renaissance. And we're in this time where people who like us, who are able to adapt and find the meta and find the modern ways of creating content, those are the ones who are going to succeed.
I love it. I love it. And tell me about influencers now. Do you think that influencers, it's not going to be a thing? Micro influencers? Tell me more.
So I was really kind of just regurgitating what I heard before. It wasn't so much my opinion on that. I think the word influencer doesn't mean the same thing as it once did. People used to think like Vine, TikTok, or Musically, not TikTok, but Musically, and Instagram particularly, when it comes to influencers. People who had big audiences on those platforms, and they were able to influence their audiences, especially if you're like a micro or nano influencer too. People listen to you. And so if you say, I like this product, then they're more than likely going to go check it out versus having someone with 1 million followers and only 10,000 of them check out. And so it's one of those things where influencers are still going to be around, and there's still plenty of people who do it. Like I had a friend who lives in Singapore, and she is a content creator and a singer, and hopefully I'll be able to interview her at some point. And I was talking to her, and I'm looking at her posts, and it's like she's successful, she's doing a great job. Like anything she can do better, it's mainly just like organizational or just putting out more, like just basically motivating her to do more, basically. She's already doing great. And I look at her content, and it's all basically influencer-based stuff, like promoting products and services. And the way she's doing it is, the old school influencer style, but she's doing really well. And so it's not going to go away. But I think it's just not really the main thing anymore when it comes to creators.
Excellent.
Just type of creator.
As we're wrapping this up, I would like to know.
Do you have to wrap up? I don't know what time you have left.
I do have to wrap up a little bit. That's why I said it's going to be in 2 parts. I already said this. When we were talking, I was like, but I want to know about this. You've done many different interviews. People have interviewed you. You've interviewed countless people. Was there a topic or question you just have in the back of your mind? You're like, I wish they would go down this route, and they never do.
Not a specific topic, but I love it when they indulge, kind of like what you did, into the multifaceted aspects. You went into the swimming, you went into the content, you went into my background. I think that pulling from all those different areas makes for the most interesting interview, and it makes it more fun for me as a guest to talk about. I don't want to necessarily just niche down to just one topic for the episode. I will do it, and I've done it for 95% of the interviews I've done, but the last 5%, I've been able to express my multidisciplinary self, and those are the interviews I enjoyed the most. And I think they also kind of offer the most too.
Tell me about your singing.
So I have musicians on both sides of my family. I always grew up with my mom and grandma singing. I think my grandpa had probably sang a little bit too, but like just, casually in the kitchen or something like that. But my mom had always sang a lot, like obsessively, and it's probably where I got it too. But then my great-grandfather was actually a relatively famous locally for piano and singing. And then on my father's side, there's a whole bunch of bands, like Mexican bands, bandas and stuff like that, that they're pretty relatively famous for their niches and genres. And so it's like, I think singing is in my blood. I found myself always singing songs on my way to work. I'd always be walking and I'd always be singing songs. And during those songs, I would listen to the tonalities and the way that people were projecting the voice and trying to make sure they got that note just right and being able to control the voice like that. And so I learned to mimic certain singers, and that was also just kind of a fun thing to do. And then eventually I started doing karaoke. And it was funny because my late mentor, who I never got the chance to talk to him about this, he was always really crazy about karaoke as well. And the karaoke place that I went to was also where my mom went to when she was my age back then. So I'm a second generation regular there, which is kind of cool. And so I became a karaoke regular, and I taught myself to sing by going to karaoke.
I love it. You mentioned your late mentor. Do you mind talking about who it was or what they helped you with?
Anthony or Tony Olson, sometimes known as Tony Chaos. That was his like stage name, I guess, or like kind of like his PolyInnovator in a way. And so it was kind of interesting. I think he actually did some sort of like content-esque marketing thing. This is back, early 2010s. So it was pretty early on, but I think he was doing some social media work and contract work for people like that. down in Florida, and he did a lot of karaoke. He did a lot of really cool things, and he inspired me in a lot of ways to keep following my dreams. And so he was definitely a good example of like multidisciplinary, maybe not like multiple different careers, but definitely doing a lot of different things and trying to do them well. And I found that like whenever I was trying to talk to somebody about something, they would always be like, no, you should go to college. They would always deflect or change the subject or kind of downplay the idea. And really, all I really wanted was to soundboard the idea or talk about it more, or here's what I'm wanting to do, like the whole previous endeavor before PolyInnovator. And he would always motivate me to keep doing it. He's like, that's a cool idea. Figure out how to do it. So he would always kind of give that mindset of like, cool, don't figure out how to do it. And I think I kept that internally. Like when Gary Vee always spouted from the top of his lungs, create 100 pieces of content a day, everyone heard that and it's like, no, how? I can't do that. It's too much. And I instead heard that and I was like, well, how do I do it? Like, sure. Okay. You say that's what you need to do. Cool. I accept that. How do we do it? And he wouldn't always tell you, but if you paid attention enough, you could try to figure it out.
Love it.
And I know you have your brand factory model there too. So that's how I found you.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. So when you're thinking about this, and thank you for those answers, has been great. We're sitting here at the end of 2024. If you're thinking about where you're going to be sitting in 2029, what does that look like? And what would you say to you right here?
What's funny is that in my early 20s, I did try to make a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. But your years are never going to go the way you think they're going to go. Obviously, none of us could have predicted 2020. I mean, there was a few futurists who said, like, oh, this is going to happen at some point. Even Bill Gates said there was going to be a biological pandemic at some point. And lo and behold, it happened. But unless you're an outlier like that, no one's going to predict those big things that happen. And who knows, maybe you can get sick. Last year, I got deathly ill. Had no idea it was going to happen like that. So you can't predict life. But it is good to plan. And I'm slowly going back to the mindset of I need to make a 5-year plan and see, because my goals are relatively the same. It's just now I need to be more expedited because I took too long. I feel like I spent too much time on free content and not enough on paid content. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it was a bad thing. I wonder if the decisions I made were bad or not, like leaving my previous job, stuff like that. You can't be too stuck in the past, but I'm just like, I'm not where I want to be. Let's figure out how to get there. And that's where the 5 years for you. So hopefully in 5 years, I might not even be in Austin anymore. I might be in LA. I might be in Singapore. I might be in Barcelona. I don't know. But that's kind of where I was like, I know I want to be somewhere else.
And with that somewhere else, would you be doing your own brand? Is it aligning with brands that make sense with your endeavors? What are you seeing?
I'm always happy to make affiliates and some sponsorships and stuff like that. Like I work with Opus Clip for a reason. They're literally a great company and I love working with them. They've actually been a great brand partner to me, even though I'm one of their smaller creators on the team. And so like I appreciate that. And I think that like working with more companies like that would be really great, and finding new ways of creating an income source. Like I really love like this diversified income sources, which all these big creators, I know you've definitely talked about as well too, and you're going to be a big creator too. And so it's just interesting to think about like the polymathic mindset really helps with diversified income. That's where I think it will be coming from. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Any last things before we end part 1 of the interviews?
Part 1. Okay. Well, I think you did a good job with probing questions. I'm pretty open, especially to a friend like you. And so it's one of those things where like, I think there's only ever been one episode or one interview I ever did where I told him like, hey, I don't want to talk about this. So can you delete it? But like, other than that, I've always been pretty open, but most people don't ask deep enough questions. And so I'm glad we got to go into that. You probably will go even deeper next time, presumably. I think that if you want to live your life the way you want to, if there's things you want to do, then you need to pursue them and you need to be stick to your guns on that. People told me to niche down. People told me to do one thing, and I knew in my heart that that wasn't right for me. I need to do many different things. So instead of fighting that, I try to figure out, well, how do I do multiple things effectively? And that's where I ended up.
I love it.
It's my niche. Yeah.
So next time, we're going to do a part 2. I don't know when, but I know in my head, I know when I want to approach you for a part 2. I'm not going to tell you, but anyway,
Okay.
There's a milestone in my head. So that is wonderful. And And thank you so much for taking the time and letting us do this today, man.
Thank you for taking the time of interviewing me. I know last time we did a pseudo interview for you too, and so it was kind of fun. I wanted to play around with this, and before we wrap up here, just kind of say it's like this kind of show we're doing here. It's just been a fun time where you and I, two friends who love content, love doing new things, and love pursuing better things, we're able to kind of delve into that and go into different rabbit holes. And so the first episode, we're talking together, doing one thing. The second episode, we're doing the same thing. And then last time we talked about you. Today we talked about me. Who knows what the next time is going to be like? Because like you said, the next part 2 is not going to be the next episode. So we'll figure out, maybe next time we'll do a new, completely different thing we didn't even think of before. So see you guys next week.
Bye, y'all.